whānanga, kia koutou, ngā mihi mahana kia koutou. E koe e te taka, mihi atu ki a koe te rangatira, e te kai hautu o tēnei kaupapa, mō tō mahi o tēnei kaupapa ki te hapa tēnei whānanga. Kei te mihi atu ki a koe. Just a slight little correction there. Koreko he doctor. Although I'm just in the third review of my thesis and it's not too far away, it's not there yet. But I thought I'd just, so still candidate. Still candidate. Mihi atu kia koutou, a tēnā rā tātou katoa. I should get into this. So obviously I am in the engineering and computer science faculty for Victoria University. And part of that is I'm also assigned to the, it's a self-selection thing, but I'm also part of the artificial intelligence group, as well as the SWEN group. And since we've got lots of gangs there, I went and created my own gang called the Te Pātaka group. Well, all those that want to be involved in Māori research, working with whānau and iwi, we all go there, so we create our own gang. But that's so that I can distinguish between what humans look like and what maybe humans may not look like. And I'll kind of like speak to that a little bit and then leave that there for everybody to think about. Before I carry on, I kind of like just wanted to give a little bit of a buzz out for anybody who's interested in participating in this kaupapa down in Wellington in October. I'm running a workshop on indigenous IT, and what that may look like. And basically, if you're kaupapa Māori, indigenous with the topic, you're in. So that's just part of a tono to actually create a space for those who are involved in Māori IT or IT with indigenous communities to continue to transfer as we come from mātauranga into the spaces of science. And then from there we can diverge out whether we want to go into these specialist areas. So I think I want to start claiming that space, if I can do that. I don't know. So I'm running some workshops in that space there. And we've also just put in we're about to put in a tono for the international version of this too, which is A-ranked. Again, putting more indigenous and Māori people in those spaces. So my presentation, and I've got the timer on, even though we've got 30 minutes, I'm doing 20, because I know the bros want to say a lot, and I've got to acknowledge everybody speaking after me. When you're first off the rank, and you know what's behind you, why am I first? Especially when you know what's coming behind you. So I guess they send out in a good way, they send out the babies first, and then they come in with the big guys. But there was a lot of kōrero yesterday, and I came up with no presentation. I think I want to see what's happening first, and then I kind of like just fabricated my presentation based on what was happening, what I was hearing. So I think I could respond and give a little bit to everybody. And because I'm a couple of minutes into it, looks like everybody gets 3 minutes each in regards to what a philosophical view may look like, what design may look like, and I put a couple of pieces of work that I'm working on, and also what an artifact proof of concept may look like, what the actual tech may look like. And then I'm going to close out with what I call the elephant in the room, one of some of our major problems that we have in this space called artificial intelligence and IT artifacts. Artificial intelligence. I'm also mindful that we're being videoed right now, so I've got to be really, really smart on how I actually communicate. So I'll kind of like go straight to the end first, and that way kind of like know what I do, and then I'll kind of like cover in all the bits and pieces in between it. And so this is about algorithms and building stuff. It's a difficult space for us as Māori or as indigenous people, Because not only are we building stuff, we want to hold on to those things that are valuable to us, which is our mātauranga, our knowledge. So we want to combine those things, and then we have to actually work in this space as well, and we have to communicate it out there. And so when I'm talking to a science group, straight over their heads. So I've got to try and figure out how to present to science groups. And when I'm talking to whānau, I'm really, really cautious on how I communicate that, or else I'll get the straight over their heads. But these are some of the logic algorithms and these are hands-on working algorithms, these. And I'll speak briefly to them. I work within the bounds of what I call an indigenous socio-technical system. Okay, so we know what wharetapa whare is, and we know what a socio-technical system. All I did was put an I in front of the STS. Why? Because I can. And now the job is to defend that space. Now the job is to communicate that space out to our communities on what an indigenous socio-technical system is. And how do I communicate? How do I build traction and communicate that out? But it also gives me the grounding I need so that I can actually say why this is an indigenous technical space and why it is a personal space. Some of the work that I work in, I have some projects working around multi-objective algorithms, which means we're building something and we've got multiple objectives inside it. I'm using AI, explainable AI, genetic programming, and this is a Māori product that we're working on. And then we've got this algorithm here on the far side here, and which I'll speak to a little bit later on, which is around this natural language processing, using some type of interpreter encoded fuzzy system, where truth is never really ever crisp, it's never 0 or 1, it's everything in between. Similar to how our whānau operate. One day I'm in the good books, next day I'm not in the good books. And so it's sometimes it becomes a revolving door. When we're working with whānau, sometimes we're in the good books, then we're not in the good books for a little bit of time, and then we're back in the good books again. So I want to speak to that one later on. And this one down the bottom here is around convolutional neural networking and how to use what we think is how to actually map our plant and flora or plant species, native plant species, so that we've got our own information data sets that we're building. One of the challenges that we've got as Indigenous researchers is using our own data sets. We continue to use data sets overseas. And so that's a huge, huge problem, along with infrastructure in that. But it's a huge, huge problem for us as Māori researchers. My baby in the middle there, even though I enjoy all of them, is about working with IT artifacts. And how can we take something that exists in the real world, make it digital, and that may be through photogrammetry, 3D models, or even an image, and then bring it back into the real world again. And that's quite important. That's quite important concept to understand if I want to think about bringing things like the huia bird back into the world again, because it was extinct. Can we model it, and then can we use that to characterise it to bring it back into the real world again? And if we can do that, maybe I can do that for humans. And can we have humanoids? So hands up, all those that, I'm working on that one. Okay, don't trust Kevin. So where does the notion of mātauranga exist in this particular idea that I'm working with? The notion that we've got this Western science understanding of how the world works, and then we've got this deeper mātauranga understanding of how the world works. And my view is that they both reside in their own worlds. But how can we find a conduit in the middle where we can both work together? And sometimes we might call them 5-point plans. Sometimes we might call them algorithms to work together so that we can communicate and organise or interact with each other in search of agreement. I mean, that's quite an important term that I use right now. The notion of communicating, interacting in search of some type of agreement. The question is, how do we communicate as Māori to a system that interacts as Māori so there's Māori agreement occurring? I've got a couple of ideas on that to progress that idea. And I want to explore that now because this fundamentally underpins a lot of the work, a lot of the mahi that I do in research. On the one hand, I try to live a very, very Māori world. And on the other hand, I work in a Pākehā world. Bringing them together where my Māori world and my Pākehā world can work as one. Okay. And so in that way I turn to this type of a whakatauki, te tiro atu ngā tuatea o te moana. I mean, it was a part of a rangatira named Te Roki Kawati's Ohoake Pokepoto. After the Battle of Ruapekapeka, when he says, as part of his post-battle speech to the people that were involved in that battle, e moko mā, e rangatira mā, e tamariki mā, te tiro atu ngā tuatea o te moana. Start to look to the ocean peaks of the waves, search for the future. And then I kind of like match that with Kāngi Tūai Te Takawena Nui Tangata. And we're not going to get there unless we get and jump on the shoulders of our rangatiras. And so in that way there, our rangatira, we have a portal to turn back to things like our ancient knowledge, to give us a lot of, and I speak of ancient knowledge quite openly at the moment, but there is a lot of depth to that. I speak about ancient knowledge in the way that we have this embedded in our whakatauki somewhere. And so that gives a bit of a driving force. So how do I bring this into my science world as something that's important to me? Something that must be able to use in the language, must be able to assign indigenous language objects when I'm using terminology, symbols, patterns and methods. And we're doing a lot of work in that terminology in the kupu world. And so my work is most probably in the object world, the virtual world, where we can think about images not only just as 2D, but also 3D, even as voxels, teleporting. Okay. And so if that's the philosophical thing that I start out with, how do I actually turn those ideas into some type of computational method? How do I actually work with this in a computational world? And so I kind of like turn to my past and I think, well, hey, this rangatira here had a good model. It's a well-known model. And there may be many models, but I'll use this model. Something that I can explain, something I can refer back to, and something that I can bring meaning to. And whilst to us we know it as the whare tapawha, it's actually quite a useful tool to actually interpret what an indigenous socio-technical system may look like. And just breaking that down, maybe in the way of how we actually establish our rules for engaging with technology. Our knowledge of the environment is not only just an external knowledge of how the world works, but an internal knowledge of how we behave, how we think. It's the relationships that we actually work with during the construction of technology in any way. And I get these sideways looks when I start using this word wairua in my faculty. So I've kind of like started to change that to embodied look, or the embodiment of. And so it's just trying to bring all of this information together to bring meaning to this particular type of model. So if that's my philosophical thinking on how the world evolves for me as a developer, how do I actually engage with that? How do I actually engage with that mātauranga or that knowledge? Remember, we'll all have, each hapu, each iwi have different mātauranga, different modellings. And so, in this way, knowledge is not necessarily universal. There's not one way to go about this. In our world, or in the mātauranga, or in the indigenous world, or even in the Māori world, what happens in Ngāpuhi doesn't happen down in Ngaitahu. What happens over Tairāwhiti doesn't happen up in, well, I don't think so, over in Waikato. So we have our versions of kawa that we work to in this particular way. But if I start to think about all of these things here, I start to wrap them into something that starts to look a little bit like pieces of information, sets of information that I can actually start to, in some way, categorize and classify how these things work. And if I assign some really, really important high-level values to those sets of information, being in mind that I'm talking to some really, really smart people right now. But if I can assign some information to those, what's that central point that connects me? So that it's a dependent variable. If I don't feel a sense of connection to this technology, how does this actually mean for me? You don't just go, I can't go and build the technology and say, hey, why don't you try this? I actually have to have some type of processing, some type of design processing early in the construction life cycle of the actual artefact itself. Now, I'm not going to speak to all three of those, but I will speak to one of them, the use of language. How do we frame information? And it's quite important that I have a really, really good grip of that. Because as an example, me and one of the bros were having breakfast this morning. I went to get me a hot chocolate. I put my cup under the hot chocolate and I pushed the button in the middle because it was in the middle and all the water went down in the middle. So what the heck? Oh, there's another button there. Okay, I pushed that button. I got my hot chocolate. The other bro, we're being videoed, so I'll just chuckle. Went and spoke te reo to it. And nothing came out. The problem was, didn't understand his language. Oh, it wants me to push buttons. Okay, so we both figured out over breakfast that we don't know which button to push and it doesn't understand te reo. I think the takeaway here is how do we frame language? And language is quite a sophisticated thing, because language isn't just about the terms we use, it's also about the objects that we engage with. And all those objects out in the world that actually give us a sense of connectedness to the world that exists in our world. And if we think about that in the technological aspect of that, is not only is it about the relationships, not only is it about the language that we're working with, that's clear, but it's about the relationships. And we don't have relationships just for the sake of having relationships. These are things that we're accountable to. And also, the accountability measure is different. I work with iwi and I put my head on we all put our head on the chopping block, okay? Because we know the consequences if we get it wrong. Oh, that young fellow went and done some work, broke. 3 generations later, they're still saying the same story, okay? And so our obligations to these relationships are not just about the relationship of what's in front of me, but it's about protecting our mana, our ability to act and survive inside a community, to stand up. And so it's about being accountable to those relationships. And obviously, if there is no understanding of the language and you've got no framing of the relationship, then how the heck do you engage? How do you actually find a way to actually engage with the technology itself? I use this here as a version of that, where the inner workings of the clock, the cogs, and then there's an interface. So when the clock turns around and the wheels go around, then it's 2 o'clock. Okay, it's just the question is what language are we? It can't be just on the outside. It's got to be an inner experience as well. And so framing in this particular way here is about the ability to think Māori, the ability to self-assess self. Who am I? How do I exist? You know, why do I exist? Okay, the ability to actually think about how you act and behave in this world. Okay. So it's not just about where am I situated, but how do I enact that situatedness in the world. Okay. And from that comes your reasoning. So my internal state of how I think and how I act, my external state. A sense of thoughtful and unthoughtful interaction with technology. Yeah, going a little bit deep here, but I mean, I think I get the message across. Technology requires us as Māori to be able to have that deeper inner contribution to the construction of, you know, so we're involved right at the design level, or at the XANT design level, which is very, very early in the stages of the IT artifact. Otherwise, it's just been given to us. So I'm going to speed this up. I'm a fuzzy guy. I'm a fuzzy logic guy, and I like the notion of vague inputs and vague outputs and interpreting, because there's a couple of reasons I like it. The first reason, just very, very quickly, the first reason is because a lot of scientists scorn it. So, that's a bit touchy. I'm going to go find out why. The other reason why is because it meets the philosophical thinking of how our whānau work. One day you're in, one day you're out. One day you are whānau, next minute I'm going to tell your mother on you. Okay. One day you can't come here for another 2 weeks, but when you come back, I'll make sure you come and have a cup of tea. Okay? Not you don't get fired and just walk out the door. Okay? And so in that way there, it's never just on, off, 1, 0, true, false, tapu, noa. Okay, it's everything in between. It's 0.2, 0.4, 0.5, 0.8. You are vaguely connected. It's just a sense of how connected are you. So for that reason I like these particular algorithms. And just returning to this algorithm here, if I think about fuzzy logic in that particular way there, this is what I call a fuzzy fire. And what it is, it's, I think the important takeaway here is whānau hapu and iwi are involved at the beginning of the construction of the algorithm. More importantly, there's a feedback loop in there somewhere throughout the whole construction design of the algorithm, where you're calling back to family all the time. And we do that naturally as developers. Does this work? Doesn't this work? Does this work? How does it work? Okay. But a little bit more deeper understanding of how that works. And in that way there, if I talk about membership functions within that, then I'm talking really just about a single membership function with a single output here, where a set X or inputs of A and inputs of B can be computationally, yes, weak, when you use this as a single membership function, weak, but it's still science. It's still explainable and it's still reduplicatable. And so a little bit of feedback for, just brief feedback for reaching agreement in regards to the algorithm that was spoken to yesterday. The idea that there's an indigenous socio-technical system that exists out there in the world, and one where I liken the two together, is that there can be multiple models. It's just about explaining what those models, how those models work, and how those models exist. And they will be transferable models. So what will happen here may not happen in another Māori community somewhere. So as developers, we have to be aware of that and understand that relationship. And I'm going to end this with, which is the elephant thing. And this is something that me and one of the bros, where are you? He's around here somewhere. There he is. We talk about this on a regular basis. Are we in a mode of fight, unable to bring out our intellectual understanding of how the world works within technology? And I suppose that's the question. How much do we want to hold on to our rangatiratanga when working with technology? Nō reira koutou mihi atu ki a koutou, huri noa te whānau, a tēnā koutou, a tēnā rā koutou katoa. Kia ora.